allow me to welcome you to our newest building on our combined campuses of MCC, built in 2013, named the Bremen Center after the late Bill Bremen, who was one of the very generous benefactors that made this very green building a reality. The Ashes, Stanley and Blanche Ash, were longtime friends of MCC. We have the Ash Science Building on our main campus in Sydney. We have the Ash TLC on this campus. They have given us wonderful gifts over the years, including a wonderful endowment to enhance our campus and our culture. And a part of that is a 3-part lectureship every year that we call the Ash Lectureship. We have guest speakers in the winter, one in the spring, and one in the fall, speaking on topics of either international or national importance. We had our guest speaker tonight on campus about a year and a half ago, I think it was, in our science building, talking about the preservation of Michigan's forests. And when he left that day, a lot of folks said, please get him back. We want to hear more about this. So tonight we have Brian Stout and his wife Iris with us, all the way from Lakeview, Michigan. So they're not too far from home. But what a rich background. They are both authors. Brian is the author of the book called Trees of Life, Our Forests in Peril. And Iris just released this book, 3 or 4 months ago, Finding the Treasures Left Along the Trail, My Cherokee Heritage. So she is part Cherokee. So for you who may have those interests, both these books are available in the back as you leave. I think this one is $12.95, this one is $8, or both for $20. Got a deal going here for you who would like to have that, and they're here to sign it for you if you wish. So a little bit about Brian. Brian is a forester. He's a grad of the University of Minnesota, where he majored in forestry, and became a forest director under the U.S. Department of Agriculture for, 35 plus years. In that time, had 15 different assignments, including the Job Corps Conservation Program. And before he retired, he was the director of the largest national forest in the lower 48 in Wyoming, 3.5 million acres in that national forest. He's been involved in D.C. legislation as well. He is highly published. He is a well-sought-after speaker. And so we're very honored to have Brian Stout tonight with us here at MCC. So please join me in welcoming Brian and Iris to our campus this evening. Brian Stout.
Well, thank you, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you this evening and share some of the concerns and thoughts that have developed over a 34-year career in the Department of Agriculture Forest Service, as Gary mentioned. But we found that after 34 years, we weren't ready to give up at that point in time, that we had not completed our mission. And so for the last 22 years in retirement, we've been working to try to do some changing in the way the science of forestry is applied on a worldwide basis. And it's been very interesting. Today is Earth Day, and we're going to talk very, very briefly about the importance of Michigan forests, and then I'm going to transition you into international forestry. Earth Day was established in 1970 and is the largest secular holiday that is celebrated worldwide. In fact, today and this week, there will be at least 192 countries throughout the world celebrating Earth Day. This celebration recognizes the importance and our connection to Mother Earth and focuses on the environmental issues that we all face on a worldwide basis. Now, I want to mention briefly Michigan forests, and the biggest thing I want to get across is that none of us can be comfortable with the forest cover that exists in Michigan, because Michigan forests play an international role. As the earth circulates, the oxygen that is produced, the carbon dioxide that is stored, affects the people in other continents as much as it affects us right here in this country. So, Michigan forests are extremely important, but they're important on a worldwide basis. These are the sustenance of life that keeps us alive as a human species. Now, this is not necessarily a new phenomenon I'm going to talk about. 600 to 700 years ago, in Europe, they were facing a similar crisis where we were beginning to be out of balance with Mother Earth. And our demands for the resources were such that we had to find other sources. Fortunately, in the 1400s, there were other opportunities. And so the anarchies and the monarchies of Europe financed expeditions such as Christopher Columbus to search for new trade routes and new lands. Unfortunately, that option has been exhausted. The other thing, if we look back at history, we will find is that history demonstrates to us and shows us that many cultures and civilizations in the past have disappeared or failed or collapsed, leaving little information as to why and how this happened. The Incas, the Mayans, the Inuits in Greenland, and so on it goes. Many cultures and civilizations. Now, Jared Diamond is a world-renowned author and writes much about the collapse of various cultures and societies. And Jared, in his book Collapse, states that most of the cultures and societies that have disappeared as a result of ecological suicide. He calls it ecocide. And of the major environmental issues that we face, the two most important, according to Jared, is deforestation, the loss of forest cover on a worldwide basis, and population expansion. And that's exactly what was happening in the 1400s in Europe. We were running out of forests, we had a rapidly expanding population, and we could not meet the demands of the people. Today, science tells us there are 5 major environmental issues that we face on a worldwide basis. And number 1 is population expansion. Number 2 is clean water, or water pollution. Number 3 is deforestation. It is continuing to this day and will continue into the future. Number 4 is greenhouse effect. And number 5 is the melting of ice and the raising of our water levels in our oceans. Now, I'm going to focus just on 2 of these elements this evening: deforestation and population expansion. I am, as Gary indicated, a professional forester. I was trained at the University of Minnesota, and I spent 34 years working for the Department of Agriculture Forest Service. I had a very rewarding career, but I have to be honest with you, I have been haunted since the first day I went to work for this agency with the science of forestry, which is what I was trained in. The science of forestry, to this day, in our academic programs, teaches the student to manage the resources from the forest. It does not teach us how to manage the forests. Now, that may seem like a very simple and small difference, but I assure you it is a major difference. If all I'm looking for is the economic benefit I can get out of the resources, it's far different than my concern to prolong human life through the continued functioning of healthy, vigorous forests. So let's look at world population. As of October 2011, the world population was at 7.3, today 7.5 billion people. And it's expanding at the rate of a little over 75 million people per year. If you look at this graph carefully, it shows that by the year 2050, our world population will reach 9.5 billion people. And as scientists tells us, that is the number 1 environmental issue we face on a worldwide basis. What about deforestation? According to what we can reconstruct in the literature and the information that the scientific world has been able to put together, we have already lost slightly over 50% of the forest cover that once covered our planet. And we are continuing to deforest. Oh, it has slowed slightly, but I just recently, this past summer, was asked to open up some of the materials that we've been putting together for a consulting firm out of Bonn, Germany, who is working in the Central America and South America area with the indigenous people there who are being enticed financially to clear their lands for the economic benefit of timber industry. And science tells us at the current rate, within 100 years, our tropical forests will be gone. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is that at least 70% of all living organisms on this planet cannot and will not survive without forests. Why is this true? Well, there are several elements that forests play a very key and important role in. First of all, they're the major production of oxygen that we require for sustenance of life. Secondly, they are the most significant storehouse of carbon dioxide that exists on our planet. Third, they prevent soil erosion. We was this winter, we're in New Mexico, where we were able to talk to a person whose ancestry settled in this particular location we visited over 300 years ago. And he was a history buff and had collected pictures and data from his early family history and demonstrated, and we have actual photographs that show what has happened to that area over the last 300 years through development and the slicking off of the ponderosa pine forests that once grew there. There were no arroyos, as they call them there, water washouts. Today they're all over. The prairie grass grew waist tall. Today it's rabbit grass that might reach 6 inches in height, because even the climate has changed as a result of removal of that forest. Today the sun beats down and bakes the soil. There is no shade. The trees that are left are pinyon pine and scrub juniper. And when the monsoon season comes, which is only 8 inches of rain in July and August, it washes all the topsoil down at the Rio Grande River. The other thing in terms of the soil erosion and the carbon dioxide is that forests provide the majority of the clean drinking water that we require on this planet. The filtration of the process it goes through and the storage of water and the keeping the soils moist is a major source of clean water. And finally, trees scrub the poisonous toxins from the atmosphere that we require to breathe. Now, just a few simple facts about trees. In 2007, there was a study done by the Department of Agriculture in which a group of scientists and economists were brought together to try to evaluate the economic effect trees have on the human environment. Basically, the 5 elements I just showed. And that showed, in that study, that one tree over a 50-year life cycle, here in Michigan, our northern hardwoods are easily living to 150 to 175 years old. One tree in 50 years produces an economic value to the human environment of $162,000. Yet the science of forestry focuses on the couple of $100 that we can get for that tree in terms of wood fiber production. Another statistic, one single tree, produces enough oxygen to keep 2 of us sitting here tonight alive for a full year, a full 12-month period, and requires carbon dioxide to grow. That's their food source. 1 acre of trees stores the equivalent amount of carbon dioxide each one of us would create driving our vehicle 26,000 miles. The contribution these trees make is unbelievable. When our forefathers arrived on this continent, it seemed like there was no end in sight. As far as one could see, the horizon was full of trees, timber. In fact, many of the forefathers saw trees as a hindrance, having to be cleared to make room to grow crops. Today, I suggest to you, those horizons are there, and we now know that Mother Earth has limitations. We can only push so far before we are going to bump headlong into a major problem. Living in balance is important, and Professor William Rees, who is an economic ecologist at British Columbia University, tells us today, here on the North American continent, in Canada and the U.S., each single one of us requires 20 acres to produce the energy and the products we need to sustain our current lifestyle. Doesn't sound like a great deal, but divide the total land mass of our planet by today's population, 7.5 billion people, and you will find there are slightly less than 4 acres available per person on this planet. Yes, we are using 5 times our share of the land mass to produce what we need to maintain our affluent lifestyle. We are now demanding more than Mother Earth can provide. We're about to run out of the fossil fuels, but we're doing everything we can to suck every ounce out of the earth that we could possibly suck out. And we're even going to the extreme of putting ourselves in danger with the fracking programs. How many of you are willing to let me fracture the foundation of your house to let a little bit of heat from the soil come in? Today in Ohio, the last 5 years, Ohio has experienced 30 earthquakes, measurable earthquakes. Oklahoma today experienced 2 measurable earthquakes per day. And science finally says maybe it's the result of the fact that we're fracturing the very foundation upon which we live. Maybe. Yes, we are demanding more than Mother Earth can provide. So remember the problem that I introduced. 70, and most scientists today say it probably is closer to 80% of all living organisms demand forest cover to survive. So what can we do about this? The past 600 years, if we look historically back at the problem to try to understand it, we have literally mined the resources that have been available. And we have done it with the understanding and attitude that it is our God-given right. Why else would they have been placed here if that wasn't for our use? And forestry today, the science of forestry, as I said, I've read almost every single catalog of every forestry school in the United States, and they will explain that their program focuses on training the students to manage the resources from the forest, not the forest. A big difference. So it should be obvious that human societies cannot continue on this path of materialism. Something has to change. Certainly population numbers are going to continue. There's been attempts to try to slow population down. I think China tried to do it by limiting the number of children. Hasn't been very successful, and it's not going to succeed. Well, we may slow it somewhat, but the population is going to continue to grow, as that graph showed. By 2050, 9.5 billion people worldwide. And yes, we've been able to slow deforestation slightly. But as I explained in the tropics, it's continuing at a very rapid rate. And as our population expands and our demand for more subdivisions, more golf courses, more recreation areas, deforestation is going to continue. There is no way to stop it. So what's the solution? Well, certainly the solution that our forefathers had in sailing west to find new lands and new trade routes is no longer available. Maybe maybe, if we're lucky, we'll find some planet in outer space that will meet our demands. But I'm not holding my breath for it. So we all have limitations as where we turn to solve these problems. But they're problems we must face. We will never slow population or stop population. We can only slow the rate of deforestation. So there are but two options left to us. Option number one is that we have got to learn to begin to recognize and live in balance with Mother Earth's capabilities. Demanding more than she is capable of providing is not going to lead us to our desired future condition. And number two, we have got to develop more sensitive management processes for the remaining forests. We have got to make these forests healthy and vigorous. And there are ways in which we can do this. Improved management of our remaining forest lands is a logical solution. And current management, I suggest to you, will not take us there. There are but two processes, basically, or management concepts that are in effect. The first was developed in the 1850s by John Muir, and it's called preservation. Let Mother Nature manage the lands herself. Keep humans out. The other concept was developed by Gifford Pinchot in the formation of the Forest Service in the 1890s.